Your mother left nothing in writing. You know that." He said it the way you'd correct a child about the weather. 12 years he'd said it. 12 Thanksgivings. 12 Christmases. The same flat sentence whenever I asked about my mother's accounts. My father, Gerald, the man who handled every dollar after she died, telling the room my mom died with no will, no note, no instructions, nothing. And my sister nodding along on cue like she'd rehearsed it. Because she had. He taught her to say it. "Mom didn't leave anything, Addie. Let it go." So I let it go. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I passed the gravy and I smiled. What none of them knew was that 3 weeks before that dinner, a teller at a credit union 3 towns over had dropped a single sheet of paper into a plain envelope and mailed it to me by mistake. And in 8 weeks, the man who'd built his entire life on those 4 words would be the one explaining himself to a room full of witnesses. But that night, he still thought the story was his to tell. The sheet of paper had a date on it. My mother had been dead 2 months when it was signed. Before I go any further, if your stomach already turned at that, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe, because what comes next is the part my family spent 12 years making sure I'd never find. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I genuinely want to know how far this one travels. I'm Adeline, 34, and that envelope was the first time in 12 years that anyone outside my family had handed me the truth. So let me take you back to the table and what I did with it. I should tell you who we are, because that matters for everything after. My mother was Ruth Whitlock. She taught 4th grade for 26 years in a small Pennsylvania town near Allentown. She was careful with money in the way teachers are careful. Coupons clipped, receipts in a shoebox, a Christmas club account she paid into every paycheck. She was the one in our house who wrote things down. Lists, labels, birthday cards mailed a week early so they'd never be late. My father, Gerald, sold insurance. He was good at it. People trusted his face. He had a way of putting a hand on your shoulder that made you feel handled, in both senses of the word. My sister Vanessa is 2 years older than me. Growing up, she was the one who needed things. The braces, the car, the second chance after the first car. I was the one who managed. Adeline's fine, my mother used to say. And she meant it as praise, but I learned what it meant. It meant I would be asked for less and given less, because I could take it. That's the wound I carried, and I'll be honest about it now so you understand the rest. What I wanted, more than money, more than anything, was for one of them to choose me. To look at me and not see the child who'd be fine without help. My whole life, I'd waited to be the one somebody fought for. My mother got sick in the spring. Pancreatic cancer. It moves fast. She was diagnosed in March and gone by July, 12 years ago this summer. In those 4 months, I drove home every weekend, 3 hours each way. I sat with her, I learned her medications, and one Saturday in June, near the end, she held my hand and said something I would not understand for a very long time. "I took care of you," she said. "Whatever happens, I made sure." I thought she meant she loved me. I told her I knew. "No," she said. Her eyes were sharp even then. "I mean, I made sure. Don't let your father tell you different." She squeezed my hand once. Then a nurse came in, and the moment passed, and I let it pass because she was tired and I was scared and I didn't want her last weeks to be about money. She died on a Tuesday. The funeral was the following Saturday. And at the reception, in our own living room, while people were still eating casserole off paper plates, my father pulled me aside and said the first version of the sentence I would hear for the next 12 years. "Your mother didn't leave a will," he said. "She didn't leave anything written down. I'll handle it all. Don't worry about the paperwork." I was 22. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? But Vanessa was standing just behind him, and I caught her face for half a second before she fixed it. She wasn't surprised. She already knew the line. Here's the part that took me years to see, because grief makes you stupid and trust makes you blind. My mother, the woman who labeled the leftovers and mailed cards a week early, left nothing in writing? The most organized person I have ever known died with no will, no note, no list, after telling me with her own dying breath that she'd made sure. I didn't ask the question then. I want you to understand that. For years I didn't ask it. That's what people like my father count on. He didn't have to hide a thing. He just had to say a sentence in a calm voice often enough that I'd stop wondering. In the months after the funeral, the house got refinanced. My mother's Christmas club, her teacher's pension survivor portion, the small life insurance policy. My father handled all of it. When I asked once, gently, he said the same thing. There was nothing written down, Addie. It all came to me. That's how it works when there's no will. Then, Vanessa got a down payment for her first house. That fall. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But when I brought it up, my father looked tired and a little hurt, and he said, "Your mother would be ashamed to hear you counting money at a time like this." And Vanessa, on cue, said, "Mom didn't leave anything, Adeline. You're making this about you." So I stopped. I told myself I was grieving wrong. I told myself I was the greedy one. For 12 years, I carried that, not the suspicion, the shame of the suspicion. And every holiday, when the conversation drifted anywhere near her, my father would say it, calm as anything. "Your mother left nothing in writing." And Vanessa would nod. The same words, the same nod. A two-person catechism, performed for an audience of one. Me. The thing about a lie repeated by two people is that it stops sounding like a claim. It starts sounding like a fact. By year 5, I'd have sworn to a stranger that my mother died with nothing written down, because I'd heard it said with such certainty so many times. That was the trap. And I lived in it. Right up until the morning, an envelope from a credit union I'd never used landed in my mailbox with my name spelled correctly and somebody else's account inside. It came in April of this year. I'd moved back to the area 2 years before. My marriage had ended quietly, no drama, and I'd taken a job as a billing supervisor at a regional hospital. I was good with records. Funny, in hindsight. I'd spent my career making sure numbers and dates lined up, and I never thought to apply it to my own mother. The envelope was from Keystone Ridge Credit Union. I'd never banked there. I almost tossed it as junk, but it had my name. Adeline R. Whitlock, the R for Ruth, and a real first-class stamp, so I opened it. Inside was a single photocopied sheet, a duplicate withdrawal slip, and a sticky note in someone's handwriting. "Ms. Whitlock, pulled this from the Ruth Whitlock estate file you called about. Sorry for the delay. D." I had never called about anything. I had never heard of this credit union. There was no Adeline who'd called. But there was a Ruth Whitlock. My mother. The slip was a cash withdrawal. The amount was $31,000. The account was a Christmas Club-linked savings account in my mother's name. An account I had never known existed, at a credit union 3 towns over from where she lived. And the date. I keep coming back to the date. The withdrawal was dated September 19th. My mother died on July 9th. She had been dead for 72 days when someone signed her name and took $31,000 out of an account my father swore did not exist. I sat at my kitchen table and read it 11 times. I'm not exaggerating. 11. The signature line said, "Ruth Whitlock," in cursive, in a hand I half recognized and couldn't place. What I should have felt was rage. What I felt first was vertigo. The floor tilting, because 12 years of a story I'd accepted just cracked down the middle. Then I noticed the second thing on the note. A phone number, and under D, a name I could just make out, Diane. I didn't call my father. I didn't call Vanessa. I want you to remember that. The quietest person at every one of those holiday tables picked up the phone and called the credit union instead. Diane was a teller who'd worked at Keystone Ridge for 19 years. She was apologetic before I even finished a sentence. "Oh, Ms. Whitlock, I am so sorry. That should not have gone out. We had a records request flagged on that account, and somebody put your address on the wrong cover. Please disregard. I'd actually like to ask about it, I said. Calm. Billing supervisor, calm. There's a withdrawal on it dated September of that year. My mother passed away in July. I'm trying to understand the timeline for the estate. The line went quiet. You're Ruth's daughter, Diane said, carefully now. I'm one of them, Adeline. Another pause. There were 2 people on the signature card for that account, she said. Your mother, and one other person added a few years back. Who? I can't release that over the phone, but the account was opened by your mother on her own. She came in herself. I remember her, honestly. She brought us a tin of cookies that first Christmas. A small sound, almost a laugh, then she caught herself. I shouldn't say more. You'd need to come in, with ID, and the records request would have to come through properly. Was there a beneficiary? I asked. The pause that followed told me everything before she said it. There was a payable-on-death beneficiary named on this account, Diane said slowly, and it wasn't the person who made that September withdrawal. That's all I can tell you on the phone. Who was the beneficiary? Ms. Whitlock, she said gently. I really think you should come in. So I did. The next morning, before my shift, with my driver's license and my mother's death certificate, which I'd kept in a folder for 12 years for reasons I'd never examined. That's the moment the floor stopped tilting and I knew I was standing on something solid for the first time since the funeral. There was a written record. My mother had left something in writing. And someone had spent 12 years swearing she hadn't. If you've ever been told a thing so many times you stopped trusting your own memory, you know exactly the feeling I had walking into that credit union the next morning. So stay with me, because what Diane slid across the counter is where this turns. The branch smelled like burnt coffee and carpet glue. Diane was older than her voice. Kind eyes, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She'd pulled the file the proper way this time. A supervisor sat in. I signed a records request as Ruth Whitlock's daughter and next of kin, attached the death certificate, and they made copies for me of what I was entitled to see. 3 documents changed my life that morning. The first was the signature card from when my mother opened the account. Her handwriting. Neat, slanted, the careful cursive of a woman who'd taught penmanship to 4th graders for a quarter century. She'd opened it 9 years before she died. The second was a payable-on-death designation, filled out in that same careful hand, dated the spring she got sick. The named beneficiary was one person. Me, Adeline Ruth Whitlock. My birth date, my old apartment address in the city, the one I'd lived at the year she was dying. She'd written it from memory. She'd gotten the apartment number right. I had to put the paper down and look at the ceiling for a second. 12 years. She'd named me. She'd done it carefully, on a form, in writing. The exact thing my father swore to a roomful of relatives never existed. My mother had reached out from a hospital bed to choose me, and someone had made sure I never knew. There it was. The thing I'd wanted my whole life. She fought for me. She'd done it on paper, in a credit union 3 towns over, where no one would think to look. And I'd spent 12 years believing I was the daughter no one made room for. I asked Diane if I could see the rest of the beneficiary form, the parts I'd skimmed past. There was a line at the bottom my mother had filled in by hand, a space for relationship to beneficiary. Most people write daughter or son. My mother had written more in that careful, slanted hand, squeezed into the small box like she'd needed the room. My youngest, the strong one. Tell her it was always hers. I read it 3 times, and then I couldn't read it anymore. 12 years. She'd written a message to me on a bank form, knowing I'd only ever find it if everything went exactly wrong. If my father did exactly what he did, if the lie held long enough, if some clerk 3 towns over made a mistake with an envelope. She'd left it like a letter in a bottle, thrown into the one current she trusted to carry it past him. And it had taken 12 years and a wrong address to wash up at my feet. The strong one, not the one who'd be fine. The strong one. There's a world of difference between those, and my mother had known it, and I'd spent 12 years living in the wrong one. The third document was the September withdrawal slip, the full one this time, not the duplicate. $31,000 in cash, withdrawn 72 days after the beneficiary on the account had a death certificate on file. Signed, Ruth Whitlock. That's signature, Diane said quietly, tapping it. When I pulled the file last week, I put it next to the signature card. I've been doing this 19 years, Ms. Whitlock. I'm not a handwriting expert. She paused. But I'd want one to look at it if it were my mother. The supervisor cleared his throat, a warning. Diane ignored him. There's a second name on the account from a few years before she passed, she said. A joint signer, your mother added. That person had access. I can't tell you who, not without the right paperwork, but the withdrawal in September wasn't made by the beneficiary. She looked at me over her glasses. It was made by someone using your mother's name. I asked the only question that mattered. Can I get certified copies of all of it? You can, the supervisor said. As next of kin with a records request, you're entitled to the documents on which you're named. The September transaction record, since it postdates the account holder's death, and you're the named beneficiary. Yes, you'll want them certified if this is going anywhere. It's going somewhere, I said. I'm a billing supervisor. I spend my days proving that a date on one form matches a date on another, that a signature is real, that money went where the paperwork says it went. I had never once turned that skill on my own family. Now I did. The first thing I did was not confront anyone. I want to be clear about that, because every instinct screamed at me to call my father and read him the date over the phone. I didn't. People like my father are good at the first conversation. They've rehearsed it for 12 years. You don't beat that with a phone call. You beat it with a folder. So I built the folder. I requested my mother's full account history from Keystone Ridge. Every deposit and withdrawal for the life of the account. It took 2 weeks and a notarized form. When it came, I sat with it the way I'd sit with a billing dispute. My mother had opened the account 9 years before she died and fed it quietly. Small deposits, $40 here, $100 there. Her Christmas club rollovers, tax refunds. By the spring, she got sick. It held a little over $33,000. In April of that year, right after her diagnosis, 2 things happened in the same week. She filled out the payable on death form naming me, and she added a joint signer. The joint signer's name was on the card. I'd asked, and now, with the right paperwork filed and my standing as beneficiary established, the supervisor confirmed it for me in writing. Vanessa. My sister had been added to my mother's account in April. The same month my mother named me as the person who'd inherit it. I sat with that for a long time, my mother dying, careful to the end. She'd name me the beneficiary. The money would come to me when she passed, and she'd added Vanessa as a joint signer, someone to help her manage it while she was too sick to drive 3 towns over. That was so like my mother. Give the responsible task to the one who needed to feel needed. Give the inheritance to the one who'd be fine. She trusted both her daughters. One of them used it. The withdrawal in September, 72 days after my mother died, after the death certificate was on file, drained the account to almost nothing. $31,000 in cash, signed in my mother's name. Not Vanessa's name, which would have been legal as a joint signer, right up until the bank was notified of the death. My mother's name. A dead woman's signature written by a living hand to avoid the paperwork a joint signer would have had to file. Why sign Mom's name instead of her own? Because a joint signer's withdrawal after a death gets questions. A Ruth Whitlock signature on a slip just looks like routine, until somebody lines it up against the real one. But I didn't stop at the account history. A billing dispute is never one document. It's the whole trail. and the trail tells you what people meant to do. I pulled my mother's death certificate out of the folder I'd kept for 12 years, and I checked the date the credit union was notified. Banks get told when an account holder dies. Usually a family member brings in the certificate so the bank can freeze and settle. I'd assumed someone did that for my mother's account in July, right after she passed. No one had. The certificate was on file at Keystone Ridge with a stamped received date. The stamp was from October, 3 months after she died. Almost a full month after the $31,000 walked out the drive-thru. Think about what that means. Whoever took the cash in September made sure the bank didn't know my mother was dead yet. They withdrew the money while the account was still alive on paper, while a teller had no reason to ask for an estate or a beneficiary or a single piece of probate paperwork. And only afterward, once the account was nearly empty, did the death certificate quietly appear. That's not a grieving family member fumbling through paperwork. That's sequence. That's someone who knew that the order of operations mattered. I added the stamped certificate to the folder. Then, I did one more thing. I went back through my own emails from 12 years ago. I'm a records person. I never delete anything. And there it was, an email from my father, dated that August, the month between the death and the withdrawal. Subject line: Mom's accounts, all settled. The body was 3 sentences. Hi, girls. I've closed out everything of your mother's. There was nothing left over once expenses were paid. Love, Dad. Nothing left over. Sent in August. The $31,000 came out in September. He told us it was empty a month before he emptied it. I sat with that email a long time. Not because it surprised me anymore. Because it was the first time I had his own words, with a date on them, contradicting the paper. In billing, that's the whole game. You don't argue with a person. You let their own timeline argue with them. I needed one more thing. The account history and the certificate and the email told me when and how much. None of them told me, to a standard anyone would believe, that the signature itself was fake. I needed someone who lined up signatures for a living. There's a professional category most people never think about until they need one. A forensic document examiner. They testify in fraud cases, contested wills, questioned signatures. They are not graphologists, not the personality from handwriting people. They're trained to compare known writing against questioned writing and tell you, to a professional standard, whether the same hand made both. I found one 2 hours away. Her name was Carol Bishop. 31 years in the field, court qualified in 3 states, retired from a federal lab. Her website was plain and her rates were not, but I'd just learned my mother left me a great deal more than I'd ever known, so I made the appointment. I brought her everything: the signature card, years of canceled checks I dug out of my mother's old shoebox, the one thing my father had let me take from the house after the funeral, because old grocery receipts seemed worthless to him, her teacher's union forms, birthday cards, decades of Ruth Whitlock's real handwriting, and the September withdrawal slip. Carol Bishop did not editorialize. That's what I came to respect about her. She laid the documents out on a long table under a lamp, put a loupe to her eye, and worked in silence for the better part of an hour while I sat very still. "Tell me what you already believe," she said finally. "I want to know if I have to talk you out of it." "I believe my mother didn't sign that withdrawal," I said, "because she'd been dead for 72 days. "Set the date aside," Carol said. "The date is a fact for a court, not for me. I only care about the hand." She tapped the slip. "Ask me again in 2 weeks." 2 weeks later, she sent a report. Bound, numbered, every comparison photographed and annotated. I read the summary standing up in my kitchen. The questioned signature on the withdrawal slip dated September 19th was, in her professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of certainty, not written by the same hand that produced the known signatures of Ruth Whitlock. She'd found it in the small things. The way my mother's capital R started with a tiny upstroke the forger had missed. The slant. The pen lifts. The forger had drawn my mother's name slowly, the way you copy something you're looking at. And real signatures aren't drawn, they're fired off from muscle memory. My mother's were fast and confident. The September one was careful and dead. Someone copied it, Carol told me on the phone. Probably had a real one in front of them. They did an adequate job for a teller who isn't looking. They did a poor job for me. I asked her the question I'd been holding. If this went in front of a judge, would you say it under oath? I already wrote it down, she said. Saying it out loud is the easy part. I had it now. A written beneficiary form naming me. A withdrawal dated after a death. A forensic examiner who'd stake her name on the forgery. 12 years of nothing in writing, collapsing into a folder I could hold in one hand. And not one of them, not my father, not my sister, knew the folder existed. I'm going to tell you what I didn't do, because it's the part I'm proudest of. I didn't call my father and scream. I didn't post anything. I didn't confront Vanessa in a parking lot. I'd waited 12 years. I could wait 8 more weeks and do it once, correctly, in front of people whose faces they couldn't manage. But I had to be sure of the shape of it first. The forensic report told me the signature was forged. It didn't tell me whose hand held the pen. There were only 2 people with access to that account. Vanessa, the joint signer, and my father, who'd handled all the paperwork. One of them had sat across a counter from a teller, signed a dead woman's name, and walked out with $31,000 in cash. I needed to know which. Diane, bless her, had told me one more thing before I left the branch the second time. Whoever made the September withdrawal, she'd said, came to the drive-thru, not the counter. We keep the camera footage? She'd stopped herself. We don't keep it 12 years. It's long gone, but the slip's marked. Lane 2, there'd have been a teller who handed out the cash. 12 years gone, no footage. I let that go. But the slip had a teller stamp, an employee initial. I asked through the proper request whether that teller still worked there. She didn't. She'd retired to Florida, but Diane, who I think had decided somewhere in the last month that she was on my side, mentioned very casually that the retired teller was her cousin's neighbor and that she'd be happy to ask her one question if I wrote it down so it couldn't be twisted. I wrote one question. Do you remember anything about a $31,000 cash withdrawal from a Ruth Whitlock account? Lane 2. That September? I almost didn't write it. I want you to know that. There's a version of this where I never ask, where I let it stay someone in the family forever, because as long as I didn't know which one, I didn't have to choose what it meant. A vague crime is easier to live next to than a specific one. The moment I had a name, I'd have to do something with it. I wrote the question anyway. I'd spent 12 years not asking. I was done with not asking. The answer came back a week later, through Diane in the retired teller's own words, which Diane typed up and signed and dated like the careful person she was. I remember it because it was a lot of cash and I had to get a manager to approve it. A man came through. Older, friendly, said his wife was sick and couldn't come in. He had the card and the account number and the ID. I didn't think twice. He was very calm about it. He even joked that she'd send him to the store for the wrong thing if he came home short. I remember laughing. His wife joked about it. A man with the ID and the account number and a story already loaded. Calm enough to make a teller laugh while he signed a dead woman's name. There it was. I'd spent 12 years thinking the worst thing my father did was tell me there was nothing. The worst thing my father did was stand in a drive-thru lane 2 months after his wife's funeral and make small talk while he forged her signature. I read the statement, and I had to set my phone down on the kitchen table and put both hands flat beside it, the way you do when you need to feel something solid. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying about my father years ago. I just sat there until the kettle I'd forgotten started to scream, and I got up and turned it off, and I was still standing. His wife, calm about it. My father, the same man who, 2 months earlier, had stood in our living room with casserole on the table and told me my mother left nothing in writing. The same man who'd spent 12 years teaching my sister to repeat it. I read that statement 4 times. Then I put it in the folder with the rest, behind the forensic report and the beneficiary form, and I closed the folder, and I made a decision. The annual thing was coming. My father's birthday, early June, every year, the whole family at Vanessa's house, now that she had the big one. The down payment house, the one with the kitchen my mother's $31,000 had probably helped pay for. I called Vanessa and told her I'd be there. She sounded surprised. I usually found a reason not to come. "Of course, Addie," she said. "Dad will be thrilled. You know how he gets about family." A pause. "It's good you're letting the old stuff go." "I am," I said. "I really am." It wasn't a lie. I was letting it go. Just not the way she thought. Pause here for a second because I want to ask you something before I tell you about that birthday. If you were me, folder in hand, certified copies, a forensic report, a forger named, what would you do? Would you call a lawyer first, walk into the police station, or sit at that birthday table and let them say, "Nothing in writing, one last time," to your face, while you knew what was in your bag? Tell me your guess in the comments before I tell you what I chose. Most people get it wrong, because most people assume I wanted a scene. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a record. Here's what I actually did first. Before the birthday, I went to a lawyer, not for the drama, for the floor under my feet. I needed to know what I was holding legally before I held it up in front of anyone. Her name was Pauline Reyes, an estate's attorney downtown. She read the file the way Carol Bishop had read the signatures. Slowly, without reaction, taking notes. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. "Your mother named you payable on death beneficiary on this account. That means at the moment she died, that money was legally yours. It did not pass through any will. It did not go to your father as the estate. It went to you, by operation of law, the second she passed." He told everyone there was no will, and it all came to him. "There may not have been a will," Pauline said. "That part might even be true. But a payable on death account doesn't need one. The beneficiary form is the instruction, and the beneficiary was you." She tapped the September slip. "This withdrawal, 72 days after death, signed in the decedent's name. If your examiner is right, and her report is solid, this isn't a family squabble. A forged signature to take funds that legally belong to you is forgery and theft. The fact that the account holder was dead removes any joint signer defense. A joint signer's authority ends at death. After that, signing her name is fraud. Full stop." What can I actually do? Several things. Civilly, you can recover what was taken. It was your money. Criminally, depending on the prosecutor, there's exposure here. But you have a choice to make, and only you can make it. She set down her pen. "How much do you want this to cost the people who did it?" "Because right now, you hold all of it. They hold nothing. They don't even know you know." I thought about the wound. About wanting, my whole life, to be the one somebody fought for. My mother had fought for me, on paper, and they'd buried it. "I want the truth on the record," I said, "in front of the family, and then I want my money back, in that order." Pauline almost smiled. "Then, here's how we protect you, while you do that." She had me file a report with the credit union's fraud department and the local police. Quietly, on paper, so that the record existed before any confrontation, so no one could later say I'd invented it after a fight. She drafted a demand letter to my father, ready to send, and she told me the single most important thing. "Don't accuse anyone at that dinner," she said. "Let them say it themselves. Let them repeat the lie one more time, on their own, with witnesses in the room. Then you show the paper. The story falls apart better when they're the ones still telling it." I asked her the question I'd been carrying since the credit union. Why me? Why would Mom name me and not Vanessa? Vanessa's the one she added to the account. Vanessa's the one she trusted to run it. Pauline looked at me for a moment, and her answer wasn't legal at all. "Read the 2 forms again," she said. "She added your sister as a signer. That's a job, day to day. Someone to drive the errands while she was sick. And she named you the beneficiary. That's the inheritance, the thing that lasts. She slid the beneficiary form back across the desk. She gave the chore to the daughter who needed to be needed, and she left the money to the daughter she trusted to still be standing when the dust settled. That's not her overlooking you, Miss Whitlock. That's her seeing you exactly right. Exactly. I had to look out her window for a second. My whole life, I'd read Adeline's fine as a sentence about being less. My mother had meant it as a sentence about being able. She hadn't left me out. She'd left me the thing that mattered, in writing, in a hand the whole family would recognize, and she'd hidden it 3 towns over in the one place my father would never think to look, because she knew. She knew what he'd say at the funeral before he said it. She made sure anyway. I'd waited my whole life to be the one somebody fought for. She'd fought for me first. I'd just been told, for 12 years, that the battlefield didn't exist. Let them say it themselves, Pauline repeated, gathering the file. Can you hold it together long enough to let them? I held it together for 12 years, I said. I can hold it for one more dinner. Let them say it themselves. That's exactly what I did. Vanessa's house was full. It was the first Saturday in June. 22 people, give or take. I counted, the way I count everything now. My father's 2 brothers and their wives, cousins, Vanessa's husband, Dale, manning the grill. Her kids and the cousins' kids in and out of the yard. A neighbor couple Vanessa liked to impress. My Aunt Carol, a different Carol, my father's sister, who'd always been kind to me and who, I'd learn, had been told the same nothing in writing story for 12 years and believed it, because why wouldn't she? My father held court on the back deck like he always did. 71 now, still good at the hand on the shoulder. He hugged me longer than usual. There she is, he said. My responsible one. Glad you came around, Addie. My responsible one. Even now, the one who'd be fine. I'd brought a gift bag with a real gift in it. A watch he'd mentioned once. Underneath the tissue paper, in a plain folder, were the certified copies. The beneficiary form, the forensic report, the retired teller's signed statement, the death certificate stamp, the August email, the September slip, 12 years compressed into 9 sheets of paper. I set the bag by my chair, and I helped Vanessa carry out potato salad, and I waited. In the kitchen, hands full of serving spoons, Vanessa bumped my shoulder the way she used to when we were kids, and things were briefly okay between us. I'm really glad you came, she said. Dad's been different lately. Slower. I think he worries you'll never forgive him for whatever you think happened. She said it lightly, the way you say a thing you've decided isn't your problem. Maybe today you two could just let it be water under the bridge. Water under the bridge. She had no idea how much water or where the bridge led. Maybe, I said. And I carried the potato salad out to the table where my mother's money had bought the granite she set it on. I want to be honest about the next 20 minutes, because people think the hard part is the confrontation. It isn't. The hard part is sitting through the love before it, watching my father be charming, watching my nieces climb into his lap, watching my uncles laugh at his stories. There's a moment every time where you wonder if you're the broken one for holding a folder under the table while everyone else is just having a barbecue. That's the trap too. The warmth is real, and the lie is real, and they live in the same man. And the warmth is what makes you keep swallowing the lie. I'd swallowed it for 12 years. Not today. I waded through the burgers. Through the toast Dale gave. Through my father telling the story about the time my mother chased a raccoon out of the garage with a broom, which got the laugh it always got, because it was true, and because she was wonderful, and because he'd spent 12 years using her memory as a prop. And then, the way it always happened, the talk turned to her. It was Aunt Carol who opened the door. Innocent. Ruth would have loved this, she said, looking around the yard. All of you together. Gerald, did she ever... I always wondered, did she leave you kids anything special? A keepsake? My father set down his fork. I watched him do it. He'd done it 100 times. Ruth was a saver, he said warmly, but she didn't leave anything written down. No will, no instructions. It all just came to me, and I did my best by the girls. He reached over and patted Vanessa's hand. "Didn't I, Nessa?" And Vanessa, 36 years old, in her down payment kitchen, in front of her children, said the line she'd been taught. "Mom didn't leave anything in writing," she said. "Adeline used to get worked up about it, but there was nothing. We've all made our peace." The whole table nodded along. 12 years of repetition had made it gospel, even to people hearing it fresh. I let the silence sit for one beat. 2. "Actually," I said, she did. "I want to walk you through what happened next exactly, because it matters that it happened in order and slowly, and that I never raised my voice once. Carol Bishop taught me that. So did my mother, really. Make them strain to hear you." My father smiled the patient smile. "Addie, not today. It's my birthday." "I know," I said. "I brought your gift." I reached into the bag and lifted out the folder. Not the watch, the folder. "There's something in here you should see first." "Adeline," Vanessa said, the warning in her voice, the same warning that had worked for 12 years. "Don't do this here." "Mom left a written instruction," I said to the table calmly. "A bank form. It named who her savings went to when she died. I have a certified copy." That was the lie, stated by them, and the first piece of evidence, introduced by me. Step 1 and 2. My father's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. "There was no account," he said. "I handled everything. I would know." The denial. Step 3. I slid the first page across the table to Aunt Carol, because she'd asked, and because she was neutral, and because I wanted it read aloud by someone with no reason to shade it. "Carol," I said, "would you read the name on that line, the beneficiary?" Aunt Carol put on her glasses. Her voice was uncertain. "It says, payable on death to Adeline Ruth Whitlock." She looked up. "It's Ruth's handwriting, Gerald. I'd know it anywhere. We wrote the church bulletin together for 15 years. Stronger evidence." Step 4. "That's a forgery," my father said, too fast. "She's had it made up. You can buy anything online now." "It's certified by the credit union," I said. "Keystone Ridge, 3 towns over. Mom opened it 9 years before she died and never told either of you. Carol, would you read the date she signed it?" "April," Aunt Carol said quietly. "The spring she got sick." The yard had gone still. Even the kids had felt the change and drifted to the edge of it. "Forms can be faked," my father said, but his voice had lost the warmth. He looked around the table, gathering his audience back. "Anyone can fill out a card and call it Ruth's. I knew my wife. She'd have told me." "She told me," I said. He stopped. "At the end," I said, "in June, in the hospital. She held my hand and said, 'I took care of you. I made sure. Don't let your father tell you different.'" The yard was silent enough now that I could hear the grill ticking as it cooled. I didn't understand it for 12 years. I thought she meant she loved me. She meant this card. Aunt Carol made a small sound and pressed her napkin to her mouth. "That's not evidence of anything," my father said. "A sick woman, half on morphine, says a thing." "There's more," I said, and I laid the second document on the table. "Mom died July 9th. This is a withdrawal from that account. $31,000. Cash." I paused. "It's dated September 19th, 72 days after she died, and it's signed Ruth Whitlock." Here's where the silence happened, the real one. Step 6. Nobody moved. Dale stopped halfway to the cooler. My uncle's wife had a hand over her mouth. Vanessa had gone the specific gray of a person who just felt the floor open. My Uncle Ray, my father's older brother, the one who'd loaned my parents money over the years and never made a thing of it, set down his beer very slowly. "Gerald," he said, "what is she talking about? 72 days? Stay out of it, Ray." "You closed Ruth's accounts in August," Ray said. "You told me yourself. You told the whole family there was nothing left." I reached into the folder and laid down the printout of my father's 12-year-old email. "He did," I said. "August, subject line. Mom's accounts, all settled, there was nothing left over." I tapped the second slip. Sent a month before this $31,000 came out. Ray read the email. Then he looked at his brother, the way you look at someone you're realizing you never actually knew. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. My father recovered first, because he always recovered first. Joint account, he said. Vanessa was on it. She was allowed to take money out. There's nothing wrong with a joint signer using an account. And there it was. The thing he didn't know, I knew. You're right, I said. A joint signer can use the account, right up until the holder dies. After that, their authority ends. The second Mom died, that money belonged to the beneficiary. To me. And a joint signer who takes it out anyway has to sign their own name and file paperwork. I let that sit. This slip isn't signed Vanessa. It's signed Ruth. A dead woman's name copied by a living hand to skip the paperwork. That would have raised a question. Then Vanessa signed her mother's name to make it simple. He snapped. It's still family money. You're making a crime out of a shortcut. He'd just done it. He'd defended the forgery. In front of everyone. Step 7. The loss of control. The words betraying him. He was so busy protecting the money that he'd admitted the signature was forged and only argued about whose hand held the pen. Dad, Vanessa said, barely a sound. Stop talking. I had a forensic document examiner compare that signature to 30 years of Mom's handwriting, I said. I laid down the report, bound and numbered. Court qualified, 31 years, federal lab. Her conclusion, in writing, under her name. The September signature was not made by the same hand that signed everything else my mother ever signed. It was copied. Slowly, by someone with a real signature in front of them. I opened the report to the page with the photographs. My mother's real signatures down one column, the September forgery blown up beside them, the differences circled in red. She'll testify to it, I said. The capital R is wrong. Mom started her R with a little upstroke her whole life. It's on her teaching contract, it's on her checks, it's on every birthday card any of you ever got from her. The September signature doesn't have it. Whoever drew it had a real one to look at and still missed the part she did without thinking. I looked at my father. Mom's signature was fast. This one's slow. You can see the pen stopping where she'd have kept going. The dead don't sign slowly. The living copy slowly. Aunt Carol leaned over the report, reading the red circles. Oh, Gerald, she whispered. I'd have known just from the R. I turned the last page over. And there's a witness. I set down the retired teller's signed statement. The teller who handed out the cash that day remembers it. A man came to the drive-thru, said his wife was sick and couldn't come in. Calm about it, she said. Had the card, the account number, the ID. I looked at my father, who had built 12 years on 4 words, and I said the 5th word for him. A man, Dad, not Vanessa. A man. For a moment, I thought he'd keep going. That's the thing about people like my father. The doubling down is a reflex. He opened his mouth, but Vanessa got there first. I gave him the card, she said. To the table, to her kids, to all of it. Her voice cracked all the way open. Mom added me so I could pay her bills when she got too sick to drive. That's all it was for. After she died, Dad asked me for the card. He said it was easier if he handled the closing. I gave it to him. I didn't know he... Vanessa, my father said. I didn't know he took it as cash, she said louder, the 12 years coming out of her all at once. I didn't know about a beneficiary. He told me Mom didn't leave anything and it all came to him and I should stop asking questions, same as he told you. He gave me the down payment and said it was my share and She put her hand over her mouth. I helped you tell her there was nothing for 12 years. Addie, I'm so sorry. I believed him too. I just believed him in the house that he bought me. The consequences had begun. Step 8. My father stood up. He looked around the yard, at his brothers who wouldn't meet his eyes, at Aunt Carol who was crying, at the neighbors he'd wanted to impress, at the grandchildren standing very still by the fence. The hand-on-the-shoulder man with no shoulder left to hold. "This is a private family matter," he said to the yard, with as much weight as he could find. "Adeline has always been—" "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't tell them what I've always been." And he didn't. For the first time in my life, he didn't get to finish the sentence about me. If you've made it all the way here, I want to say one thing to you before I tell you how it ended, because you stayed for the part most people scroll past. If you have ever been the one your family decided would be fine, the one who got the smaller piece and was told to be grateful for the table, I see you. You're allowed to ask for the record. You're allowed to want the truth in your hand. Set whatever boundary you've been afraid to set. That's all I'll say. Now let me finish. He left the party. He didn't take the watch. I never gave it to him. The week after, my lawyer sent the demand letter that had been sitting drafted in her files. $31,000, plus the years of interest it should have earned for me, returned, or the matter would proceed both civilly and to the district attorney with the forensic report and the teller's statement attached. My father got his own lawyer, who read the file Pauline had built and, I'm told, advised his client to settle quickly and quietly. There is no good defense to a forged signature on a dead woman's account when a court-qualified examiner has already written down what your own sister will testify to. He returned the money within 2 months. Not because he was sorry, because his lawyer told him the alternative was a courtroom and possibly a charge at 71 in the town where everyone knew him. The town knew anyway. That's what happens when you do a thing in front of 22 people in a backyard. My Uncle Ray stopped taking my father's calls. The neighbor couple Vanessa had wanted to impress found other plans. My father had spent 40 years building a face people trusted, the hand-on-the-shoulder face. And it turned out the whole thing rested on no one ever lining up his words against a date. I lined them up, the face came off. He sold the insurance practice that fall. The official reason was his age. The real reason walked out of a barbecue with a folder. He moved to a smaller place across the county line where fewer people knew the story, which is the closest thing to an admission I ever got from him. I did not pursue the criminal case in the end. I want to be honest about why, because it isn't forgiveness and it isn't weakness. It's that the criminal case would have been the state's, not mine. Out of my hands, dragged out for a year, my mother's name a file number in a docket. I'd gotten what I wanted. The truth was on the record. The money was back. And I was done letting Gerald Whitlock set the terms of anything in my life, including how I spent the next year. My mother's $31,000. With interest, a little over 40 by the time it came back. I did not keep all of it. I kept enough to feel her hand on it. The rest I put into a scholarship at the elementary school, where she taught for 26 years. The Ruth Whitlock Award. It goes every spring to a kid who is, in the words I wrote for the plaque, easy to overlook and worth fighting for. Because no child should have to wait until they're 34 to find out somebody chose them. Vanessa and I are not what we were, and we are not nothing. She refinanced the house. She offered me half its value. The part she said was really mine. I told her no. I didn't want her home. I wanted her honesty, and she'd finally given me that in front of everyone she was afraid of. We talk now, carefully, on my terms. She has never once, since that yard, told me what I've always been. She asks instead. It's a start. She called me a week after the party. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, she was crying before she got a word out. "I keep thinking about it," she said. "The window." "What window?" "The night Mom kicked the raccoon out of the garage." "No, that's not. I mean, the dinner table. All of them. 12 years of holidays. Every time you'd bring up Mom's money and I'd say there was nothing. I never once checked Addie. He told me there was nothing, and I repeated it because it was easier, because he'd given me the house and I didn't want to look at where the house came from." She took a breath. I told myself, you were the dramatic one. It was easier to think you were greedy than to think I was a coward. I let her say all of it. I didn't rescue her from any of it. I believed him, she said finally, but I helped him. Those aren't the same, and I'm not going to pretend they are. It was, I realized, the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. 12 years too late, and still the first time. I told her I'd heard her. I didn't tell her it was okay because it wasn't, and we both knew lying about that was how we got here in the first place. My father I do not speak to. That's the boundary, and it's clean, and I don't apologize for it. He returned the money, and he never said he was sorry, and I've stopped waiting for the apology, the way you eventually stop checking a mailbox for a letter that isn't coming. He severed something 12 years ago in a drive-through lane with a dead woman's name. I just finally let it stay severed. Last month, I drove out to Keystone Ridge Credit Union to close my mother's account properly, the way it should have been closed 12 years ago. Diane was at the counter, 19 years and counting. She remembered me before I said my name. It came out all right then, she said. Not a question. It did, I said. You mailed that to the wrong house. She smiled. Funny how the wrong house was the right one? She slid me the final paperwork. Your mom really did bring us cookies that first Christmas. Snickerdoodles. I'm not making that up. I signed the last form as Adeline Ruth Whitlock, the R for Ruth, the way my mother wrote my name on a beneficiary line when she was dying and choosing me and trusting that one day, somehow, it would reach me. It reached me. People ask if I regret making a scene at my father's birthday. I tell them I didn't make a scene. I read a record out loud and let two people finish the sentence they'd been saying for 12 years. The scene was theirs. I just stopped agreeing to be quiet inside it. Here's the only thing I know for sure now. They can tell you there was nothing in writing. They can say it so many times you forget how to doubt it. But somewhere, in the careful hand of someone who loved you, the truth might already be written down, waiting in the wrong house for the right person to finally open the envelope. My mother made sure. She told me so. It just took me 12 years to believe her.